I was on my way to America because of something I'd read in a book 10 years earlier. I could have been watching the in-flight movie, George of the Jungle, a comedy about a Tarzan-like character and his adventures on encountering modern civilization. Some of the other passengers were watching it, and because they were wearing headphones, kept bursting into laughter without warning. I guess lots of us like stories in which the underdog ends up the hero, just by following his instincts. But for me, there was enough of that going on in the book I was now rereading. It was called Outsider Art, and it was about art made by people who didn't consider themselves to be artists. In the book was the story of an Italian immigrant who for half his life spent every spare moment creating something pretty amazing in his backyard. He never drew up any plans for what he'd built, and basically just made it up as he went along. Yet the Watts Towers are now a national monument. Although I'd come to America to see these towers, I didn't intend to go there straight away. In fact, whilst the towers were in California, I'd just touched down in Florida, and still had a 5,000-mile journey cross-country to complete before reaching the West Coast. I was going to visit other places in America that were like the towers, places where otherwise ordinary people had achieved something monumental, just by saying something about themselves and what they believed in. I wanted to find out why people spent so much time making these places, and what it was that got other people excited about them. Whilst the Italian immigrant was constructing his towers in LA, about 30 miles south of Miami, a Latvian immigrant was doing a little building of his own. Ed Scoundin suffered from TB. He was only 5 feet tall and weighed about 8 stone, but somehow he managed to build himself a home out of 2,000 tons of solid rock.
Welcome to the Coral Castle. My name is Ed Scoundin. I will be your host on this audio tour of my life and work. Quite a sight, isn't it?
The place has now become a tourist attraction, and the official story went that the inspiration for it had been Ed getting jilted on the night before his wedding by his child bride. Her real name was Agnes Scuffs, but for the rest of his life Ed called her Sweet 16.
People would look at me, all 5 feet and 100 pounds, and almost laugh. I hated it when asked how I moved and carved.
A virtual Ed Scoundin now guides visitors through Coral Castle, but I was lucky enough to be shown round by Kay, who worked here for 25 years before technology took over. She hadn't forgotten any of her spiel.
He said if you're 5 feet like him, rest your legs on that ledge, but if you're taller, put one leg on each side. Most comfortable chair in this whole place. If you sit in it, you won't want to get up. It's so comfortable. Isn't that great?
It's not bad, yeah.
Well, we'll have to continue. I know you want to stay there, but it balances on an axle of little babies.
Ed didn't just sculpt chairs out of coral, though. He'd also constructed a bath, a sundial, a telescope, a barbecue area, models of the moon and other planets, and a repentance corner. Whatever that was.
Okay, now we'll go over to the 9-ton gate. And that's considered his most outstanding achievement. 9 tons, it balances, it pivots from above and it's balancing on a gear and bearing. He used to brag a 3-year-old girl could push my gate with 1 finger.
So I should be able to stop it with 1 finger. I mean, I'm a 34-year-old man.
Well, that'd be a little hard because it's moving pretty good now.
I mean, it doesn't take much force to get it moving.
See what a little bit
I can do that with 1 finger.
on the side. It's a very little bit of clearance on the side.
But then once it's moving, it's got quite a lot of momentum, hasn't it? Ed never allowed anyone into the castle while he was working. So exactly how he managed to build it using only modified car parts as tools is still a bit of a mystery. When he died in 1951, he took all his secrets with him, including whether the whole place really was just a monument to his lost love.
16 stairs for Sweet 16.
And so this is where he actually
Yes.
actually did his
This is
sleep
his
up here?
living quarters.
Right.
Here's his bed. He used to keep it up during the day to the top. He said, give your house one sweep and it's clean. He said, don't waste time cleaning house.
The mattress looks like it's seen better days now.
It sure has.
Have you got any idea why he started building this place in the first place?
Why Ed did? Well, you know, most people want it to be, you know, for the love of the girl that jilted him, but he built it for himself too. Yes, he had her in mind because he made this imaginary world, but he really, that he was able to move these rocks, I think, was more important to him than the girl. That was finished.
Whatever the driving force was behind Coral Castle, it had been strong enough to make Ed Leeds Scanlon completely unconcerned as to where he got his head down at night. People visiting Coral Castle now were probably amazed to see that amount of effort put into a place with so few home comforts. When I eventually reached my hotel, I felt it my duty to photograph my first encounter with America's famous freedom of choice. After 6 hours of driving on the right, I opted to sleep on the left. The pillow was rock hard. Next day I drove through Alabama looking for a trailer park on the outskirts of a town called Prattville. I was trying to find a place called the Miracle Cross Garden, and although I only had rough directions, I was told I couldn't miss it. Though people were now calling this place a work of art, it began life as a way of preaching the gospel to passing motorists. I like art to have a strong direct message, but the religious slogans painted on old fridges, washing machines and cars, as well as crosses, made me slightly wary of meeting the man who'd come up with them, the Reverend W.C. Rice. I wasn't really in the mood to be crucified. Hello. My name's Jarvis.
Where you from?
I'm from England.
England? Oh, you were them.
Yeah.
You can go and sign my guest book if you want to. Let's see
Well, can I just have a little talk with you first?
Huh?
Can I just have a little talk with you first?
Yeah, then you can go on. Yeah.
Thank you.
I like to talk.
Well, I've been looking, I had a quick look
I'm
round
going to
here.
pull my hat off, and I'll put it on a couple of them.
Yeah?
Mix it up.
All right, I'll take mine off as well then.
Mix it up a little bit.
So, why did you start building all this?
Well, God told me to build it. But now, I never knew it was going to turn out like that. God told me to build it. Like you told Noah to build an ark.
I noticed when I drove in here today, there are a lot of signs that say you will die. And there must be, I don't know how many, but there are a lot of them. So why do you repeat the same message over and over again?
What they're up there for is warning people. You're going to die. You believe it?
I know it.
I'm going to die. At this is, it's a warning station, warning people. It's all built from the Bible.
I also noticed there's a sign on the front of the house saying that the place is for sale for $5 million. If somebody did actually come up and say, here you are, look, I'll give you $5 million, how would you feel about that?
Well, I don't want to up on it there. It's costing $25 million. I put two signs up over there. Your price, $25 million.
Yeah.
People got it. You might have it. You over in England.
No.
There's some of them over there got it, and some in the United States got it too.
Oh, yeah. What do you think when people say that you're an artist?
I ain't no artist. I'm a businessman. I got my diploma from God, and Jesus, and the Holy Ghost. That's the best one you can get on this earth when you get it from them.
Right on cue, there was an enormous clap of thunder, and the heavens opened. As Mr. Rice ushered me into his makeshift chapel, leaving the camera crew outside, my initial wariness reappeared. But there was no need for me to worry. The Reverend just wanted me to have a souvenir of my visit. Although he just told me he wasn't an artist, Mr. Rice did insist on signing the cross before he gave it me. Maybe the growing interest in his work was bringing him round to the idea, even if not all of the attention was welcome. As for those who'd stolen stuff that later turned up for sale in galleries, they'd be getting the comeuppance one day. I don't know what the Reverend W.C. Rice would have made of the man who'd built the place I was on my way to now. Someone who'd been a gay prostitute, a gambler, and a regular user of marijuana in his time. He'd been born Eddie Owens Martin, but changed his name to St. Owen in 1935 when he had a vision in which he was told to become a Passaquayan, the originator of a new way of life. He'd run away to New York in his youth, but I was now driving to Georgia, to the personal kingdom he'd constructed on returning to his mother's farm. I was driving to the land of Passaquan. St. Owen was no longer around, so I was to be shown Passaquan by Gwen Martin, who'd met Eddie when she was a student and was now the place's living caretaker. There's lots of figures with hair sticking straight up.
No,
Is that the way that he wore his hair?
Yes, he did. Hair to him served as an antenna to the universe, to where he could collect this cosmic energy.
Eddie used the scum produced by boiling rice as a kind of primitive styling mousse. It sounded disgusting. And of course, I am a hair care expert. I mean, it must have taken a long time to build this, and also it must have taken a bit of money. How did he manage to get money together?
He had to learn how to hustle to survive. And he just happened to have enough nerve to where he could talk to people. He's a shrewd judge of character. He said, I'm not psychic. If somebody wants to come up here and pay me $25 or $30 to have their fortune told, then I'll take their money and I'll tell them their fortune. That's how he could afford to be able to buy all these materials. He had a 6th grade education. He didn't know anything about line, form, and through trial and error. And he did this in a little over 30 years, starting at the age of 49.
It's tedious work and it's slow, but it has to be done very carefully. Put on without a purpose or a motive in your own mind, it's not very effective. Comes off as very cold and no life in it. That's why you have to have someone do it who has an affinity for the work, or feeling, or desire to create.
It's quite kind of sexually uninhibited. I mean, for instance, these, did he have any special kind of beliefs about sex?
That I don't know about.
Whatever the attraction, Eddie's free and easy attitudes did earn him a band of admirers who would come round and join in with various projects, including the marathon music sessions he held in his kitchen.
All the time he was doing this, he was also kind of glancing out the window. And he was eating crackers, and cracker crumbs were all in his beard. And,
Fred Fussell became Eddie's friend in the 1970s, while he was curator of folk art at Columbus Museum. Now he ran the Passaquan Preservation Society.
This is a figure wearing a power suit. St. Owen had this notion that if you could apply pressure to your body in a certain combination, the right combination, that you would actually begin to levitate, to float above the surface of the earth. And I asked him if he had made one and won it, and he said, oh yes. And I said, well, did you levitate? Did you float? And he said, no, but I felt real light.
Do you think it was just after recognition as an artist, or was it more as someone who had a kind of a way of looking at life, a philosophy of life that he thought other people should appreciate?
No, I think that he wasn't very interested at all in evangelizing his personal beliefs, religious beliefs or philosophical beliefs. But he did see himself as an extremely creative artist whose work should get notice. It's a wonderful example of what one cantankerous but extremely creative and energetic person can achieve. So there's a good lesson, I think, that human creativity is a powerful force.
By the early 1980s, Eddie had started to lose his hair and his strength. Apparently he'd always said that if his health got in the way of his work, he would end his life. One morning, shortly after returning home after a heart operation, he sent his housekeeper into town to buy provisions, and while he was alone, took a gun to his head and shot himself. I was sad to leave Pasaquan. The place still seemed to have an atmosphere of openness and freedom, even though Eddie was no longer there. That he'd been so disappointed at failing to make a living from his art was a shame, because he seemed to have mastered something very few people ever do, the art of living. He'd probably been very jealous of the person I was going to meet next, a preacher from another part of Georgia, whose work had brought him celebrity status.
Now, my first guest I mentioned, he is from Somerville, Georgia. He's a former minister and bicycle repairman, and he's become apparently a very much sought-after folk artist. His work has been shown in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and the Smithsonian Institute. But apparently he is best known for his backyard collection of broken glass, old tools, hubcaps, and used bicycle parts called Paradise Garden. We thought I'd like to meet him. Would you welcome Howard Finster? Howard? How are you, Howard? Well, Howard, I thank you for being with us tonight. You look like a gentleman who has a lot of fun out of life.
Oh, yeah, it's healthy for you to laugh at least once a week.
Well, thank you, Howard, for being with us.
Before he started getting invited on chat shows, Howard Finster had been a Baptist minister for 40 years, but gave up conventional preaching when he realised people couldn't remember the content of his sermons. Since he was 3 years old, he'd been experiencing visions, and in the 1960s, he had one in which a 15-foot tall man told him to start building in his garden. In 1975, around the time this footage was shot, Esquire magazine discovered Howard and called what he'd been building a garden of paradise. Since then, he'd produced cover art for Talking Heads and R.E.M. Coca-Cola had used his work in their advertising, and he'd even been commissioned to produce decorative Easter eggs for the White House.
They had to move. You got to move. You got to
Superstars don't exist in the world of outsider art, but if they did, Howard would be one. I felt like a bit of a groupie. The state of the garden was a bit disappointing. It was certainly more dilapidated than in the film I'd seen of it. But I put this down to the fact that at the age of 81, Howard probably couldn't get around as well as he used to. The World's Folk Art Church should have been exhibiting visitors' own paintings, but was unfortunately not open due to the collapse of some of the floors inside. Many items had been sold to museums and private collectors. Those that remained were showing their age. One thing the garden did have now that it didn't have in the past, however, was a well-stocked gift shop. And I bought a couple of souvenirs before meeting Beverly, Howard's daughter, who ran Finster Folk Art, since buying out her brother's interest in the business for $25,000 apiece 5 years earlier.
What's your dog's name, Beverly?
This is Coco. Come here, Coco. Coco just had a haircut. You want to wave at him? You want to speak? If you'll speak, I'll give you something to eat.
Beverly was taking me to see her dad at his home. It seems a bit silly now, but I was really quite nervous.
Jarvis. It's Jarvis.
Daddy, this is Jarvis.
Get you a seat and make yourself at home.
All right, thank you.
I'm working on making a couple of I'm rich right now.
You're probably the best known folk artist in America, aren't you? I mean, you've been on...
Oh, no, they go
Do you
on
think
about
so?
all such as that, but that's not even in my line. Being famous is not even in my subject.
No, I'm not saying that you want to be famous, but you have become the most known person. And have you got any theory on why that is?
Now, my work is well known. People are learning about me all over the world. And are you taping this?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's be sure you get it, because that's what counts. While you're making money off of it, if you ever make any off of it, I'll be preaching, and you'll be helping me to preach.
So does your work come to you in visions from God?
Yeah.
Can you actually see something or hear something? Or is it just more like an idea?
Well, you just see it. I can see it, visions. You're working on this box. And people, wherever that goes, whoever buys that, they'll be coming there to interview that. And what you fellas is getting the first interview of it. Y'all are getting the interview of me doing it. And 5 years from now, you might be interviewing that same piece in New York, and you could tell them that you interviewed me doing it. And that would give you a higher rating in your film. It might make a hit film for you. If I keep getting advertised more and people begin to knowing me more, people are going to be able to make more money off of me. And all of them that sends me 10%, they help me survive. And
I didn't really want to talk business, but as it seemed quite important to Howard, I thought I'd find out how he'd made the transition from his previous source of extra income, bicycle repairs, to the religious paintings he did now.
One day out there painting on a bicycle, I'd painted the fenders white, and the wind blows them over sometimes, and they'd get a scrape place on them. You know? And I'd take a brush and try to patch out where it got skint, and it just seemed like it made it worse. Something just told me to take my finger and rub in that paint and rub it on there with my finger. About the second or third time I dipped down, I looked at that finger. And when I looked at that finger, there was a face in that finger, and that paint on my finger. Let me draw that for you, show you how it looked. Might get this where you could see it on TV. There it is. I looked in that paint, and there was that face, and it was looking right at me. And it said, "Paint Sacred Art." And I said to it, I can't do that. And he said, "Paint Sacred Art." And I always think about when some problem comes up, I think about a solution for it. And I just took a $1 bill and taped it on a board and got me a chair and sat down and started drawing George Washington. And when I ran him off of a $1 bill, I felt like I could do art. I don't know how that face got on my finger from just dipping it in white paint, but it did.
These are prints, Daddy, that we need to get signed. Jarvis, I hope you enjoy your tour here in America, and we're really happy that y'all came by and visited with Howard in Paradise Gardens.
Thanks ever so much.
I have to work to keep him going nuts, and she's always got more to do than I can do.
It keeps him going.
Okay then.
It keeps him going.
Okay then. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Don't get run over.
I really liked Howard. Though he talked about it a lot, I don't think he was just in it for the money nowadays. Art was still his way of spreading God's message to the world. It was more that if someone was going to make money out of it, then he didn't want to be left out. Many self-taught artists do get ripped off due to their naivety. I thought if anyone should reap the benefits of his success, surely it should be Howard and his family, rather than some art dealer. In a week's time, I was going to get a flight to LA, but before then, I was going to visit 4 more sites spread right across the country.
Ain't it hard to stumble when you got no place to fall? In this whole wide world, yes, I got no place at all. Ain't it hard to stumble when you got no place to fall? In this whole wide world, yes, I got no place at all. 'Cause I'm a stranger here, I'm a stranger everywhere. Would go home, but honey, I'm a stranger there.
Since leaving Howard Finster's, I'd realised just how big a country America was. In just over a week, I'd driven almost 2,500 miles. The creators of all the sites I'd seen died years ago, so I'd tried to speak to people who'd known them well. But in Chicago, I'd had problems.
Virginia!
I hadn't quite managed to meet up with someone's sister.
Virginia! Hello?
The house used to belong to Virginia's brother, Mitchell, but since his death, she was the only one to look after the place. Though it was bound to attract attention,
Virginia!
Mitch would never discuss his work with anyone,
Hello?
and Virginia seemed to be carrying on this family tradition. Mitch had apparently begun covering the place in crosses to mark the Pope's visit to Chicago in 1979. But the messages didn't seem particularly religious, and I'd have liked to have found out why he'd kept on putting them up long after the Pope left town. But there didn't seem to be much chance of that. If Virginia was in, then she obviously didn't like people taking an interest in the house, just like her brother. But she might have to get to like it soon. I'd heard rumours that she was planning to sell the place, though I pitied anyone trying to pick out a for sale sign amongst all that lot. In Kansas, in a town of only 250 people, I'd seen a place that attracted 10,000 visitors a year. Samuel Dinsmore wasn't shy of attention. After he died, he was mummified, placed in a coffin with a glass lid, and put on permanent display in the mausoleum he'd built in his garden. But even whilst he was still alive, he'd aroused other people's curiosity. In his 80s, he'd married a 20-year-old girl and had a couple of kids with her. John and his sister Emily Jane had come back to the Garden of Eden to tell me some more about their father.
Why do you think he actually started building the sculptures around the house?
He was in politics quite a bit, and he wanted to run for office. He did run for office. He failed at a few times, and I always felt that he built these statues to voice his own inner feelings and to communicate his ideas to the public, which he did.
In Sam Dinsmore's Guide to the Garden, there was an example of how he communicated his ideas to the public in a very direct way.
Apparently he used to talk down a hose, didn't he, at passers-by?
Yeah, it was sort of a rain spout that he'd talk up. He would talk about he was God. You know, he would just do this as...
He'd say, Cain, where's your brother Abel, you know.
Those kinds of things. And it would come out well. It would travel up through that sound and come right out through that eye, the all-seeking eye of God, you know.
But the bird built a nest in there, and that kind of messed it up.
Why do you think that he wanted to put himself on show after he died?
He wanted to perpetuate this place, I think. And I noticed this has been an attraction to some degree, because a lot of people that come through here, I think this is one of the reasons they want to see, hey, here's somebody that's been there for how long? Oh, he's been there maybe over 60 years. Yeah, I want to go see that.
In Houston, Texas, I'd seen a place built by a postman who believed that eating oranges could help you live to 100 years of age and still be active. For 25 years, he worked on creating a kind of theme park to illustrate his beliefs, opposite his house on a normal suburban street. He called it the Orange Show. Ty Eckley was his next-door neighbor.
There was an athlete in the United States called Bo Jackson one time, and he played baseball like Babe Ruth, and he played football like Jim Thorpe, and everything he did was off the charts. And his career ended when somebody tackled him in front of the goal line, and he was so strong and he was so determined, he ripped his upper torso and his hip away from the bottom torso that the two guys were holding on to, and got the ball over the goal line. I mean, that's just incredible. Jeff was like that. He put an entire working career into building this place after most people retire.
When he deemed the place ready to be opened, how did that go?
It was pretty bad. Another person more in tune with our times would have gotten an ad agency and sponsors and would have made sure that there was a stream of, 50, 100,000 people a year coming in. He just expected that the monumental effort had been made. He was ready for them to show up, and they didn't show up.
Jeff died 22 years short of the age of 100, disappointed by the poor response to his Orange show. But these days it was something of an attraction. A wealthy female admirer had saved it from demolition and turned it into a centre for the city's Folk Art Appreciation Society. In another part of Houston, later that same day, I'd found the last place on my marathon drive. A place built by a man who probably only thought of oranges as something to cure a hangover with. John Milkovich drank a 6-pack of beer a day and kept all his empties in the attic until after he'd retired. Then he spent the rest of his life decorating the house with them.
I wondered, because there's so much stuff on the outside of the house, did he do stuff on the inside of the house as well?
No beer cans inside the house. No.
Was that because you wouldn't let him? Do you think he would have done?
Well, I don't know if he'd lived long enough. He may have started on the inside too. But I said, no, the inside of the house is mine, the outside is yours.
And
we had a perfect marriage.
Did you help him at all with any of the stuff?
No, he did it all himself. Took him 18 years.
When the place started getting kind of famous, was he pleased if people came round to have a look at the place?
Yeah, it made him laugh, you know. Mm-hmm.
Why did he laugh?
Got a kick out of it because he said he wouldn't go around the block to see it.
I guess that must have made me a prize idiot then, seeing as I'd just driven halfway across the country to see the beer can house. But I didn't feel like one. All the places I'd seen were made by individuals who didn't make any apologies for what they believed in. Some of them had been desperate for attention. Some hid from it. Some even laughed at it. The inspiration behind the places ranged from social reform to social drinking. But they all showed people saying something about themselves loud and clear. And if I was an idiot for being into that, then I was quite happy to be one. When I touched down in LA, the sun was shining and all was right with the world. But it didn't last for long. I drove north to a place called Simi Valley, through some very un-Californian rainfall, to a site made by an old woman known locally as Grandma Prisbury.
There was a man come in the other day, and I was coming from here, and I got about halfway, and he said, "Are you the crazy woman that built this place?" I said, "I guess I am the only one here."
Grandma Prisbury passed away 10 years ago, and I'd been told her place was now a bit of a disaster area. A lot of the work she'd done over the course of 25 years had been destroyed in a single day. The Northridge earthquake of 1994 brought much of Bottle Village to the ground. But when the site received $500,000 from the Disaster Relief Fund, it seemed that the quake might turn out to be a blessing in disguise. But the real disaster to hit Bottle Village wasn't an act of God, it was more like an act of Congress. Local politician Elton Galgally had visited the village almost 25 years earlier. It was a day out he'd never forgotten.
I spent 25 cents for my wife and 25 cents for myself, and we took a look around. If it wasn't for me feeling sorry for Grandma Prisbury, I would have asked for my money back.
That wasted 50 cents had obviously been preying on Elton Galgally's mind, as he blocked the relief grant on a technicality and then forced the Preservation Society to pay back the $19,000 that they'd already spent. This was why Bottle Village was still in such a sorry state.
I made this house because I've got 17,000 pencils. Or 18,000 is the case here. Run in, run in.
She just needed a place for her pencil collection, and when she finished that, then she wanted to build a house for the dolls, and that's the way she kept on. So she has 15 bottle houses here now.
Given that the whole place was built out of old bottles, cement and hardboard, it was quite impressive that so many of the buildings were still standing at all. Inside them, however, Grandma's prized collections were slowly mouldering away. The rain didn't help, but looking around Bottle Village was a depressing experience. The Preservation Society was still fighting, but as things stood, unless it could meet state of California earthquake requirements by the year 2001, the whole place would have to be demolished. After seeing what could happen to a place after its maker was dead, even when people were fighting to save it, I was glad that the next person I was going to meet was still very much alive and right in the thick of putting his ideas into action.
Hello, Mr. Knight.
Hello.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm all right, Jarvis.
Well, I'm glad to see you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Sorry I'm a bit late. Got a bit held up. Lorry's on the road.
That's okay.
All right.
I think the timing is good.
Leonard Knight's truck was impressive enough, but it was now taking me out into the middle of the desert to see his real pride and joy. He first came out here to try and launch a giant hot air balloon. On the side of it said "God is love." It was 200 feet tall and had taken him 5 years to make by hand. He never got it off the ground as it was far too big to fly. But it did lead him to the place where he would eventually realise his ideas, though in an entirely different way. The message "God is love" was still there, but it was now on the side of the multicoloured man-made hill Leonard called Salvation Mountain.
So do you have to do lots and lots of coats of paint for it to get really shiny then?
Yes, yeah, to get it really shiny, it takes a lot of paint.
Yeah.
If I can paint this whole thing maybe 10 more times, a shiny paint, it's going to really start to get people's attention more. This is probably the best place in the whole country to build a monument like that, because the desert is dried out and the paint shows real good, you know.
Mm-hmm. So it all kind of turned out the way that you thought it would do?
Right, I think the less I know about it, the better it turns out a lot of times. I just seem to do it.
Mm. So when it kind of comes naturally, then you know that you're doing the right thing?
Yeah, almost that way. And when I really think that I want to do something my way, it falls flatter than a pancake.
Yeah?
So I'm going to have to learn just to go by my impulse or something.
Yeah.
But I was never an artist before at all, further from it than anybody that ever was.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to develop, mainly by mistakes. I can sure make mistakes.
Even though Salvation Mountain is out in the middle of nowhere, Leonard still hadn't escaped run-ins with authority.
So Leonard, I heard that you had a bit of trouble with some people saying that this place was toxic or something.
Yes. Yeah, in 1994, they said it was a toxic nightmare and they had to go in a toxic dump.
Mm.
But people backed me up, probably by the tens of thousands, and finally they backed off, and it all worked out real good so far.
So who was it? Was it the government people or?
It was the lay law environmental experts.
Right.
They said I had lead in the paint. But every old painting in the whole world's got toxic paint in it, so why pick on poor little me? Yeah, the whole mountain is solid clay, and I soak it in 5-gallon buckets all night, and it gets nice and soft. Then I put 3 buckets in here, and probably more straw than that. Whoops. And then you mix the straw with it, and then it hardens back into clay. And that's how the whole mountain is built. I talk as if I know what I'm doing, but I don't. But it's here.
It looks all right, and as you say,
It's not going to fall down.
But I'll tell you, I like to paint. Boy, sometimes...
Well, I gathered that.
Did you gather that?
We brought some paint. We got some in LA. We got 5 tins, which I know, well, it'll go some way.
I'm going to look real happy because I'm carrying paint. Okay.
It's all right. You don't have to do acting.
Okay, if I open it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
What do you
Yeah, that's a pretty green. My paintbrush is yellow, but when you put it in there, it'll just make the green paint look shinier.
Yeah.
And it make it look like it's shading.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sloppy way of doing it, but it's how I do it. And I'd just like to go ahead and paint some flower stems.
Yeah. I hadn't really expected Leonard to use the paint straight away, but once he'd opened it, it was obvious that he couldn't resist trying it out.
But another thing that I do is really sloppy. But I slop a lot and run a lot, because I know I'm going to have to paint this over again anyway.
Yeah.
So if I get sloppy, I can paint faster. If I get sloppy in the right places, I can do more.
Yeah.
I kind of like that yellow in there too, because it just looks like reflections.
Mm-hmm. So do you think there'll ever come a time when you think that you've finished it?
I hope not, because I'm really awful happy doing it. Boy, that whole mountain's going to look good with this on it, isn't it?
The whole place already did look pretty amazing, especially with the evening sun on it as I was preparing to leave. When you're no longer here, what would you like to see happen to this place?
If it's protected, and then in 100 years from now, it'd be the paint would probably be thicker and people would take care of it.
Uh-huh.
On and on and on, for generation after generation. That's what I'm working on, and it looks like a lot of people want me to succeed with it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because the mountain was here, the clay is here, the adobe's here, the straw is here, and I just came in and put it together. You're cheating, ha ha. Repent someday and pray the light.
Leonard insisted on singing a song to send me on my way back to LA. I'd stayed a lot longer than I'd meant to because I'd had such a good time. Salvation Mountain seemed to sum up what these places were all about. People didn't make them for any glory or recognition they might get for it. They made them because they got such a kick out of what they were doing that they really couldn't help themselves. It made such a change to the dry and theoretical way art often came across. And in the end, that was probably what attracted people to them. I was now only a few hours away from my final destination, and the reason for my coming to America in the first place. Somewhere that started out as one man's hobby, but had since grown into something much bigger than that. This is Watts, the most violent and dangerous area in LA, according to the newspapers. But I wasn't going to let a little thing like that put me off now. Maybe I should have been surprised when I drove over there to see the towers and found it completely silent. But any surprise I did feel was nothing compared to the one I got when I caught sight of the towers themselves. I knew there was some renovation going on, but I hadn't expected quite this much. Simon Revere built the towers all by himself. The tallest one is almost 100 feet. He didn't use any scaffolding. He didn't even have an electric drill.
Some of my people, they say, what is he doing? Or some other people that they thinking I was crazy, and some people that they say he's going to do something.
Simon Revere died in 1965. I was here to talk to the man responsible for the towers now being covered in scaffolding.
On October 10th, 1959, I pulled on the tallest tower from the north with a load that would put the highest wind load that ever happened in Los Angeles on the side of the Watts Towers.
The city's Department of Building and Safety plans to pull down the famous Watts Towers aroused a storm of protest.
But Bud Goldstone wasn't trying to destroy the towers. He was doing his best to save them. They'd been condemned as a public hazard, and the city was going to pull them down until the Preservation Society called Bud in.
The towers withstood the test, equivalent to a 75-mile-an-hour wind. So, the towers will stand.
They were declared a national monument in 1990, and the scaffolding is part of a major renovation program that Bud is helping to supervise.
Did you ever get any idea of why he first decided that he wanted to do this?
He could never verbalize on why he built the Watts Towers. He was interviewed for years by different reporters who came out here from 1935 on, and he told each one a different story. He told one reporter that his wife died and they buried her under the tallest tower. He told someone else he gave up drinking, and that's why he built the Watts Towers. He told someone else, I lost my job. I lost my job, so I started spending 34 years building them. But I don't really think he knew why he did it.
I built the tower myself, and I got it head in my mind. I know I want to do something. I say, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something.
He put over 40,000 individual little ornaments in the mortar, and they all went in at exactly the right moment, when the mortar was not too thick or not too dry. When I worked on the Apollo program, the astronauts came back from the moon, and they came to the place I worked. And the civil engineering people had laid out a sidewalk that they wanted the astronauts to put their feet into. And Neil Armstrong put his foot in the cement, and he pulled it out, and it all went mush. And he put his other foot in, and it all went mush. And I was thinking about Rodea, okay? This was a whole department that had to get this mortar ready, and they knew when he was going to be there exactly, and it just hadn't hardened enough. I think it took them like 4 times to finally get the mortar to the right consistency. Rodea did this 40,000 times, hanging by his left ear up in the towers with no scaffolding.
I never had a single helper. One thing, I couldn't hire any helper. I don't have no money. Not a thing. If I hire a man, he don't know what to do. A million times, I don't know what to do myself.
Nobody can really say why people make this kind of art. Not even the individuals who build the places. But the feeling that it's important in some way does seem to be growing. 45 years ago, the city authorities were only interested in the towers because they wanted to pull them down. But due to public pressure, in the last decade they've spent millions of dollars on them, so that when the scaffolding comes off in the year 2000, the towers will be back to their former glory. All this would probably surprise Simon Rodea if he was still around, as when he finished work on the towers after 34 years, he signed the deeds for the land they stood on over to a neighbour and then disappeared, without a word either as to why he'd started building them or why he'd ended up leaving them. In the spring of 1921, when an Italian labourer came up with the idea of doing something different with his spare time, I guess he really didn't know what he was starting.